I'm Vladimir. I'm from Madhead Games, and I'm here to talk about the journey we went through while developing our game over several years. I still feel like I'm from a small, scrappy studio, like we're not playing on the same level as the big guys, but actually this is kind of a huge achievement for us. So, yeah. Okay. Our studio actually began by working on hidden object games, and we still have this complex because of it. These are mass-produced, hyper-casual games for the audience of mostly women, mostly from 35 to 65, so not your regular gaming audience. And most of our team started in the industry in these kinds of games. But we all wanted to do more. We all wanted to go to bigger and better projects. And our studio started developing several side projects. And one of them eventually evolved to be Pagan Online. So the genesis of the idea came from a man, Saša Ristić, also known as Krieger, who on his own developed a concept for a character, Marko Kraljević. This image of his even went viral. It was posted in the media, and he told that he would like to make it into an animation or a game. So somehow, when he came into our studio, one of the ideas for one of our side projects was to make a game with this character. Now, it all comes from the idea that we want to make something of our own. Because we all grew up with games, with fantasy fiction, and we all want to see Serbia and our culture represented in it. So every time anybody wants to make something with fantasy or gaming, they usually go to two sources, epic poetry or Slavic mythology. And we decided to do both, because why the hell not? Why not go for the first idea that everybody really wants to do? But this design of Marko is, yeah, he's not your usual hero. He's ugly, he's grumpy, and in a way, he represents the uglier sides of our national character. So unfortunately, this iteration of him never made it to the big league. But this was our starting point. And he is kind of an ugly Serbian stereotype, with the furry hat and the big mustache and the hairs and tattoos. He's like a ruffian. I mean, if we compare, this is an illustration of Marko Kraljević by Petra, a really awesome artist. So this is more of the typical fantasy genre. But obviously, in the beginning, we wanted to do something different, something rougher. And that's how it all began. So when I'm here to represent the team effort, I was on and off the project at several points. So my personal input was limited. So when I asked the guys what do they want to be told about the production of the game, one of them said, well, you know how every big IT company says that they came from a garage? Well, we came from a basement. So in our Madhead studio, the game that was to become Pagan Online started in the basement with a team of 5 people. So, as I said, they didn't know what to do, but they wanted to do a game with Marko Kraljević and with Slavic mythology, and somehow they decided that he should be fighting demons and Turks, because that all makes sense. So these were some of our first designs and some of the first game characters. You can see the Turkish warrior, how diminutive he is compared to the mighty and powerful Marko Kraljević, or Kingević, as we started calling him, which is a very weird name that actually stuck up to Pagan Online. And it's unpronounceable by most English-speaking people. so it was sidelined a bit. And those team of 5 and later more people worked on the first iteration of the game. This is something that came up with. So this is one of our early screenshots. We had to figure out everything from scratch. Some of the people work on some games before this. Most of them were new to this. We didn't have any pipeline, just 5 people in the basement. So we tried to reuse bought assets from Unreal Store. We tried making our own. And the first idea was to have really stylized characters to match the design of Marko we had in the beginning, with lots of realistic textures. But then it was decided that it was unfeasible for this kind of production. So because as a casual gaming studio, we had loads of 2D artists. So it was decided to bring more 2D artists into the project and see what they can bring to it. First man to join the team as a 2D artist was the future art director Nicola Bromwich, and he started making his concept art. He started learning how to work in an Unreal Engine, how to make pictures beautiful in Unreal, and his background is mostly as a traditional painter. So these are some of his early concepts, where he started exploring more of the color space and how to make the game more pretty. And then we decided, okay, we need to put more into this game. We need more designs, and we had huge art assignments for anybody in the entire studio. So tens of people, several tens of people. Anybody who had an idea to contribute, they could do some concept art in their own time and submit it. So we had huge bunch of drawings of various heroes, enemies, monsters, and we tried to pick out from that which ones could be used for the game. So no guided art direction, just, okay, people, you're all creative types, let's see what you can do. So these are actually some of the examples that made it to the game. So these are still people mostly working on casual gaming. But we all had that big drive to do something bigger and better. So some of the people really stepped up. I mean, today this still looks kind of scrappy, but we evolved a lot as a studio, as a team. So after some year, sometimes in production, decision was made, okay, this project seems to be going somewhere, but it's not going to make it in this form. So the decision was made to go big or go home. And there was a complete retooling of the art style. And we decided to go from the redesign of the main character first. So on the right, you can see the Marko in a cinematic, as he was before, so not your really hero protagonist type. And on the left, you can see him retooled more as a classic video game barbarian type of character. Fortunately, we managed to avoid the cliche of him having blue tattoos on half of his face, but that was also an option at some point. So Ivan Zorkic, the second art director, was brought in from our Novi Sad studio section to work some of his design magic. And he decided that we should go more mainstream with our design. So we looked more at games like League of Legends, Diablo, World of Warcraft, tried to figure out what made the designs from those games successful and how to integrate those into our pipeline, which could be said that made the game look a bit more generic, but the idea was that they knew something that we didn't, and we had a lot to learn. So, and at this time, we rebooted the main character, and we started designing a bunch of armors for him. So it was supposed to be an action RPG. So one of the first ideas was to have lots of equipment, which would be visually represented on the character. So we had new concept artists on the team trying to develop more designs. And you can see the evolution of this more cartoony, more streamlined design. This is one of the first bosses in the game, King Vukašin. In the Serbian history lore, he was supposed to be the father of Marko, which in our story he's raised from the dead by evil forces. So Marko had to face him as the king of the undead at some point. Yeah, and we decided to switch to more 2D painted textures. As I said, we had lots and lots of 2D artists, so we tried to integrate them into the pipeline. Instead of the most realistic textures, to go for the more of a hand-painted style. This is concept art, but fairly represents fairly well the image we were going for, the look we were going for the textures in the finished game. And at this point, we also decided to retool the way the campaign was going to be structured. So our first idea was to have a traditional ARPG campaign, going through levels, solving quests. But the decision was made to make gameplay sessions shorter and keep them contained to small arena-like levels. And to have a central hub where all the non-combat interactions in the game would be managed. And it was timed into the lore to make the so-called Pantheon the central hub of the game. These are some of the designs for those smaller arena-type levels. So we weren't really creative with the types of levels. We had like the snowy level, the graveyard, the desert, and the seaside. So we even decided to go for a bit of a pirate feel at some points. And this is the design for the Pantheon. These are color variations, trying to figure out what the feel of the place would be, and this is splash art representing the final solution. And at this point, really, Pagan Online was shaping up to what it would be in the end. So, limited combat encounters, 5 to 10 minutes running through monsters, and then spending time at the Pantheon with the crafting, with leveling up, with running into other players. And yeah, at this point, it was decided that we should concentrate on multiplayer co-op play. So there was a huge issue, like, was this going to be a single-player game or a multiplayer game? What can we make in production? And finally, we decided we wanted to keep it to single-player, but have some co-op capabilities. And at this point, so we started bringing in more and more people on the team, and we actually started structuring our art department. So besides the programmers and technical art, we had a separate 3D art department who were just doing models. Animation department, just doing animation, and then we had a very hybrid kind of 2D art department, because our 2D artists were simultaneously engaged in concept art, doing textures, doing splash art and marketing images, and even crossing over into level design. And at this point, we got a new addition of a star Serbian artist, Vanja Todorić. I remember when he came over to our studio, I was really happy. I've been following his work for years. And now he was there to handle illustrations. So he didn't adapt his own art style, but his art style was integrated into the game in special ways. So he did some splash art, but mostly he did lots of interior illustrations for UI elements. And we'll see a bit of that later. So at this point, we had to make a decision about what to do with characters. So far we only had one character. And that used to be the basis of the game. Like, it was a game inspired by Marko Kraljević, but it was decided then to go for several different characters. And we had no idea at first of which those characters are going to be. And we had to come up with designs for them. And so we had our first major venture into the really sexy stuff of doing character design. And we decided that the second character in the game was going to be the opposite of Marko, and she was going to be this really dark female sorceress. So again, we separated time for the entire art team. Everybody stopped what they were doing, and for 1 week they just did ideation on the new character. Her working title was The Blood Ritualist. And finally we had some sort of actual process for doing character design, because all of us, we all work on our skills in our spare time. We all watch lots of tutorials, videos. We even went to some art festivals and conventions, but we had no unified system how to do concept art. So most of our concept art assignments were like, okay, you do you, and we'll figure out how to use it. So for designing the Blood Ritualist, we actually had a proper workflow assignment. Our art director made us, everybody do the reference page. You can see the example of one on the left. So we all had to pick, like, what were our references for spellcasters, for villains, for pretty blondes, for interesting hairdos, even for successful cosplays, because we knew that we were shooting big, and hopefully one day somebody would do a cosplay of one of our characters. So we decided to even think of that up front. And on the right, you can see some of the early designs by Ivan Zorkic, the art director himself, as a guideline of where to go. So at this point, I feel we did some of our best work. Here are character designs by Petra Nikolic. I think she really had this, like, schooled concept artist approach, like working with silhouettes, shapes, colors, working in references, like, okay, the spider, the scorpion. And I think her work was really on point. Other artists were more trying to figure out their own style on the way. So the bottom row is Vanja Todorić, also very experienced concept artist at this point. On the left, these are my works. Yeah, it was my first time designing a character, and I was like, how the hell do I do this? I don't know how. But for me, what made this assignment is I tried to think of her as a character first, like what's she like, what is her personality, and then how to visually represent that, how to draw that. So even though my drawings are super scrappy, I wanted to reference like the poisonous snakes with the bright colors, or poisonous flowers or mushrooms, like the colors that scream at you, stay back, I'm dangerous. Because I figured for the character, even that was just a pose, like she wanted to seem more dangerous than she is. And on the right of my work is fellow concept artist Viktor Kaludjerovic. Also, so you can see we all went in different directions. Some of us were experimenting with different colors. Some stuck to the usual red and black, which were to be expected for a dark sorceress who works with blood. And the next stage, okay, so we had to design a bunch of armors for our characters. But since our first two runs were mostly designing fancy and epic armors, and we had enough of those, so now we have to go back and do the lower level armor design. And you can see at this point, we already kind of got the hang of how should concept art for a game look. So some of the simpler armors for the Blood Ritualist. And then we made our design for our third character. So the third character was designed to be, again, completely opposite. So he was a wild druid boy who is blind and has a huge animal companion with him. Designs by Petra Nikolic and Boris Nenezic. At the beginning, we didn't nail which kind of animal he would use. In the end, it turned out to be a bear, because everybody loves bears. But here you can see an experimental owl bear. If you ask yourselves, where's the Slavic mythology in all of this? Well, it's there somewhere. So the direction we were going is like, okay, we don't want to get deep into the Slavic lore. We just want to make like our version of the things that everybody is familiar with. So more like a shade or a spice, just to spice things up. I mean, in the lore of our game, we do have named Slavic gods. We do have Perun and Svarog. We do have typical Slavic design elements, but mostly we are feeling just like little kids who wanted to make big video games and looking at all the popular sources. Okay. Another really awesome person we had on our team was Ivan Stojkovic. He's a really talented illustrator and animator, and he did the cinematics in his own style. So again, designs were handled by Vanja Todoric, and they tried to match their styles. I think this intro cinematic is one of the most beautiful parts of our game, and it really works. But so far we had several different art styles. So we had one type of graphics for the cinematic, one type for in-game illustrations, one type for game characters, but somehow it all worked. And these are character portraits by Vanja Todoric. And yet again, we had a slightly different style for depicting inventory items. So these are just 2D illustrations. Most of them were handled by me, and you can really see my casual gaming background. So bright colors, contrast, and everything is super shiny and super glowy. Okay, so after we had our first 3 characters nailed down, we decided that we were going to make even more characters. So once again, we took all of our artists and gave them weak, free range, like design any character you would like to see in the game, and from that pool of designs, we would pick some of them which would make it into the final game. Our guidelines were really minimal. So again, everybody did work in the way they're most comfortable with. Some made lots of silhouettes and then picked from them. Some tried making really finished quality images, which would bring you into the character. And some had hybrid of the two. So lots of different approaches. Some of these designs were implemented almost as is. So you can see Istok, which mostly features in the game as first drawn here. Some of them were retooled, and some of the time the designs were game mechanics were adjusted to the design of the character. Other times we had game designers coming up with the mechanics for the character first, and then writing briefs for designing them. And you can see some of our fancy splash art. We artists love doing splash art. For these, there's no big secret, like look at how the great and fancy artists do it and try to copy it. Mostly we are referencing League of Legends splash art. So this is Istok by Boris Nenezic. This is Morok, our, what's the fancy term, psychopomp? The obvious deathly characters, design and splash art by Petra Nikolic. And the next thing that was decided is, okay, scrap the idea that all the characters are going to wear a bunch of armors, but let's concentrate on making skins for them. So again, much of the way that characters function in League of Legends. So every character was to have 5 skins. And it was, again, fun to do variations on the character. Also, the question was, like, are these skins just different clothing sets, or different characters in their own right would just share the game mechanics? And the answer is, at this point, we decided our lore was going to be really inclusive. So the world of that features in Pagan Online is just one of several worlds. So some of the characters come from like different dimensions. So they don't have to all belong to the same civilization, same culture, same technological level. And the idea was to maybe even incorporate like more pantheons except the Slavic one. So we obviously have designs here influenced by the Egyptian, the Mesoamerican, and other cultures. This is Valeria, one of the characters, obviously not from the same Slavic world. Basic design by me, additional skins by Vanja Todoric, splash art by me. She was one of the characters which was specifically designed to fill a gameplay role. So our game designers wanted to do a shooty character with 2 gun-type implements. And because our world is still sort of medieval, we don't have actual firearms. At least we didn't have them at this point in the game. It was decided that you would have like these automatic crossbow type thingies, and my soul still suffers because I had to design non-functional weapons. But I guess it's a video game. And the next big shift was when we decided that our 2D painted textures weren't really cutting it for the main characters, because they were featured in large screens for like character selections and stuff. So we wanted to make them more detailed. And at this point, we decided to bring in new level of detail into the texture, like more micro detail, more grime, dirt, scratches, and we decided to make the shift to using actual metals. Like I'm a miniature painter, and maybe you know there was this style of doing non-metallic metal. So on 3D objects, you would paint the metals as if it was a 2D image. And when I was doing that 10 years ago, everybody was telling to me, hey, it's a useless skill. Why would you paint metals with flat colors when you can use metallics? And then when I was working on game textures, I was like, yay, I finally get to utilize that skill. But now we were switching to doing like hybrid. So the metallic finish was added to the painted metal underneath. But it worked. So why not? And we had, besides the skins, we were working on lots of different color schemes. So this was also a very interesting exercise. So when you import the model into the game engine, and you mask several parts which you can change color to, and you do color variations of the character. And in the beginning, this was really driving me mad. Like, okay, how do I come up with more color variations? I need to come up with like 5 or 6. Then the art director told me, okay, do 20. So that really pushed me to be more creative. I think I'm going to integrate this into my further into my process, even when doing basic designs. Like, don't try 5 color variations, try 20. Yeah, I'm surprised of everything I came up with this. And at some point in the production, we also had to invent the names for the colors. So that was also fun, like all your poison pinks and lavender ashes. I don't know. Fortunately, these were only working titles. They didn't make it into the final game. And yeah, so I've shown you a bunch of fancy character design stuffs, but the reality is that we artists were mostly painting rocks. It's like days upon weeks of just painting textures for rocks. So you can see like desert rocks with glowy lava, cave rocks with a bunch of skeletons, and statues made of rocks. So lots of painting rocks. Actually, I like painting rocks. Okay. So yeah, somehow we managed to bring our game to the end. One last thing I wanted to show you for the cool points. I got to design this really awesome Sabaton themed skin. Okay, like so I'm listening to Sabaton at work as a work assignment, and at one point I'm thinking, okay, I made it in life. On the other hand, yeah, it's kind of cheesy and metal, but so yeah. In the end, we are very proud of our accomplishments. I think at this point it's safe to say that we didn't make a global hit. I don't know how many of you played Pagan online. I'm sure some have. But as artists and as a studio, this was a major project for us, and we feel that just bringing it to the end and putting it out there was a success in itself. Really steep learning curve for a lot of us, but and of course, so many ideas changed. The game looks basically nothing like those previous versions. but I guess we did manage to make a game of our own. So, thank you. Do you have any questions?
Hi, I didn't think you mentioned, but how long did it take for you to create the game? It seems like a lot of process and a lot of time, but you never mentioned how long it took.
Around a little more than around 4 years. So.
Thank you.
Hey, Lado.
Hey.
Do you know at one point how many people were there at maximum, at a certain point, working on the game?
I don't know the exact number, but around 65.
Okay. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you have a video of the game, some kind of trailer?
Sure. I don't have it here, but sure, you can find it on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Should have brought a video. We have some fancy ones.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question that's not that much about art, but will there be maybe an expansion for Pagan?
I can't say at this point.
Okay.
I want to say about, to ask about monetization and funding for the game. How did you secure the funding?
We were picked up by Wargaming as a publisher. So basically, they helped us put it out. So.
And about monetization, how did you, microtransactions and...
currently, there are no microtransactions in the game. You can just buy it through Steam or through Wargaming directly.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any coders, or you done mainly using tools?
What?
Is there any programmers or using to code something, or you used only tools?
Yeah, of course. We had a huge programming department. I just wasn't talking about their aspect of the work. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.